Hey, video. Surprise. Anyway, this guy, whatever his name is, I don't know, some guy, CardinalVirtues called on this channel anyway. I think his name was something else, and it was something else, and he was crazy and insane, and something else and something else. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. So he's making some sort of video response to me, but doesn't have my name anywhere, so I didn't even know about it, except I got a link to it from somebody else. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But anyway, I don't know why it's called a member of New Jersey Tea Party. Is that what he is? Ew. Anyway, so he's responding because I guess Edible Napalm directed him to one of my videos on vegetarianism that sort of got into these other issues of social policy. So right here, he's starting to talk about the cigarette tax, and he's going to defend it, which is outrageous. It's completely unconstitutional. I mean, he's a teabagger, and he apparently doesn't know what that whole little bit about liberty, rights, cigarette smoking is none of anybody else's business. You can make laws about where we can smoke, but the fact that we can smoke and do it legally, you can't use the tax code as a majority, okay, discriminatorily. And that's all they're doing. They're using the tax code to basically just tax people because they're a minority, and an unrepresented minority because they're not segregated. So without segregation, a minority has no representative rights, okay? They can just be exploited by the tax code, and the only thing that can stop them is a good Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court didn't do its job and has failed to stop this exploitation of a minority vice. It can demonstratively be proven that alcohol causes a ton more social damage than cigarette smoking, and yet alcohol is taxed at like 30%, where cigarettes are taxed at 800%. 30%, 800%. Can you see the insanity of that? That obviously only exists because one's a majority vice and one's a minority vice. That's fundamentally unconstitutional. I mean, if you can't get that, you're not a teabagger. But anyway, this one should be able, anybody who cares about constitutional values should be able to get this, that you can't use the tax code this way. It's an inappropriate use of the tax code. Now, if you wanted, they've used the excuse that they're protecting some sort of social interest, children. You want to stop children from having access to an addictive substance, then you pass laws that punish people for giving cigarettes to kids. Really terrible punishments. Like, I would even suggest a death penalty for anybody who is a two-time offender in selling cigarettes to minors. Yeah, that'll stop kids from smoking, and that will grandfather out the existence of nicotine addicts, probably, because 90% of nicotine addicts become addicts in their youth. So you want to solve the problem, that's how you solve the problem. They don't want to solve the problem, they just want to exploit a minority vice for tax revenue. And if you can't see that, you're stupid. So anyway, let's hear his excuse, his defense. I haven't heard this yet, so it'll be new to me.
And Gary has a point there, which is why I believe, substance abuse should be legal. But there is a societal negative effect to that. Typically there's no one-to-one sort of, you are hurting someone by smoking, unless you're doing it in public in secondhand smoke. But there is a societal...
there's no proof of secondhand smoke any more than broccoli causes cancer and stuff, all right? The statistical data on secondhand smoke doesn't escape the margin of error. Okay, that's how bad it is. It doesn't escape the margin of error. So that's bullshit.
Also, when Gary or whoever eventually develops lung cancer and then has...
Everybody dies, newsflash, okay? So the Cato Institute studied this, and cigarette smokers are actually a net benefit to the society, okay? Yeah, they die sooner, but guess what? They collect less Social Security, and they collect less medical care. All right, people have this delusion that you get to die more than one time. No, you get to die one time, okay? And lung cancer will kill you quick and less expensively than a lot of other late age diseases. Emphysema is kind of expensive as a death, but like I said, you're going to die of something inevitably. And statistically, the longer you live, the more expensive your death will be. That's just the way it works out. Okay, so cigarette smokers are a net beneficiary to society. They collect less pensions, less Social Security, and less medical care. So this is a lie that somehow cigarette smokers have to pay their way. No, cigarette smokers are paying their way. They're overpaying their way. If you're going to tax the fuck out of them, then you should tax them less on Social Security. They should pay less payroll taxes because they get less benefits out of the system. They should pay less to Medicare and Medicaid and less to the rest of those long-term social benefit programs if you're going to play this game, okay, and lie, okay, about some kind of social liability. They're not a social liability. And look, I'm totally opposed to anybody smoking cigarettes, okay? Don't get me wrong. But let's not pretend. Nicotine has been declared by highly professional, educated scientists as one of the, if not the, most addictive substances known to man. Okay, it's in the top 3 if it isn't number 1. And you're going to play this game talking about people's choice? Oh, please.
To use hospital resources because most people aren't going to be able to necessarily afford all of the end-of-life care that might otherwise hit them. They're going to put a huge burden on their families, or if they don't have families, possibly on the taxpayer because of our medical system.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. This is all just a lie, okay? This has no factual basis. There's no statistical evidence indicating that cigarette smokers cost more. Okay, the facts are, the evidence is Cato Institute, not exactly a liberal think tank. Okay, so yeah, if they really did the hard study, this is what's going to be found. All right, and the government doesn't want anybody to know about that because then they would be seen for the duplicitous liars that they have become. All right, the truth is, cigarette smokers are a net beneficiary to society. They take less from the system and pay in more. Period.
They might be on something like Medicare or Medicaid, and that might pay for things as well. So there is a societal cost to things like cigarettes or alcohol.
You're just flat out wrong, okay? And cigarettes are alcohol. Here, now you just said alcohol. 30% tax versus 800% tax. 30% tax versus 800% tax.
Or drugs, even if they were the direct impacts of it were just limited to your own body, and you weren't, say, inflicting secondhand smoke on someone else.
Well, again, this isn't about secondhand smoke, okay? No one's arguing that you don't have the right to regulate the frig out of the social arena. I think it's nonsense. I think it's absolute nonsense. I don't think it's based on anything scientifically credible. But if you want to regulate me out of smoking in public areas, fine. But you really have no business regulating it out of my car or regulating it out of my living room or regulating it out of, walking in the street. That's just plain bullshit.
So there is that little oddity, which I'm sure Gary understands as well. But
no, I'm sorry. No, I don't understand any of this because this is not the truth. This is propaganda. That's what this is called. It's called lying, bullshitty, nonsense tripe. All right? Do better than this.
The other thing he said, and this is kind of the bulk of his video, and this is what confused me the most, is he said it was unfair for him to be forced to pay for child health care and child education. And he referred to this as the imposition of, like, Sharia law or Sharia-style law upon him and upon the country.
I didn't do that, but I was arguing with somebody who was saying he was accusing vegetarians who haven't passed any law of being Sharia dogmatic law imposers or something, and they're not. So that was the counter argument. But let's understand, property taxes. 80% of property taxes on average go to fund child services, either directly education or medical services or other extended services. All right, 80% of property taxes. That's in some towns it's going to be 90%. I mean, if you yeah, so that's what property taxes are paying for. Okay, why do I get taxed out of my house to pay for somebody else's reproductive decision again? Why is raising their children my responsibility? I think having children is unethical and immoral. Why should I have to pay somebody to do it? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever, does it? Does that make any sense as a liberty interest that I should have an obligation to pay for somebody else's? Why don't they pay for my condoms? All right? I mean, that would be at least a little bit fair, right? That they take $8,000 from me and they give me back $50 for condoms a year? I'm optimistic.
He views this as subsidizing other people's reproductive habits, first off, but since he was originally...
Not a habit, it's a choice, fucker. Come on, get serious. Reproductive habit? No, reproductive goddamn choice. It's their personal decision. Why is it anybody else's responsibility to pick up the bill for it? Why? Because they have some God notion? Because they have some delusion that they have a right to impose life on things? They want to play God, and I should have to pay them to play God? I mean, I don't think they should be allowed to fucking own goldfish, let alone fucking own babies.
To a video about vegetarianism, I did find it a bit odd that he suddenly took this weird track and spent most of his time talking about child health care, child education, and then democracy. This didn't seem to flow to me. But he...
Well, I guess you didn't watch the contextual videos, right? So you didn't watch the original video I was responding to, maybe? Because in that video, what was basically argued is there's no such thing. Apparently there's only one kind of law. That is, you cut people's heads off for committing any kind of crime. So we have no choice as vegetarians but to advocate that all the meat eaters are guillotined. That was essentially the argument, that there is no other policy possible. And I was just pointing out how the immoral Sharia law already exists. It is Sharia law. It is fucking religious dogmatic law that forces me to pay for other people's kids, essentially. And let's not pretend it's some other kind of institution that's not imposing that. It's fundamentally religious nuts who are having most of the goddamn kids. And we're essentially being obliged to pay them not only to have these asshole idiotic morons, but to try to brainwash them into their religious institutions. Why should I have to pay somebody to do something I think is immoral, unethical, wrong, stupid, irresponsible, reckless, crazy, insane, selfish as fuck? Why should I pay somebody to be a selfish fuck?
Doesn't think it's fair or just or whatever for him to have to pay for the social services for other people's children. He refers to this as having his life degraded. He refers to this as the minority, which he refers to as birthers, stealing money from the majority.
No, it's the other way around. So, again, you got that wrong. Obviously, it's a majority of people who are in some way connected to family values, quote unquote. Yeah.
Even though I'm fairly certain the majority of the world aren't anti-natalists like him. But what strikes me as odd is the rhetoric he uses to be...
Well, look, I was against subsidies for having kids before I was, strictly speaking, an anti-natalist. I mean, I think it's just wrong to socially subsidize the activity of having children. If you can't afford to have kids, you shouldn't have any.
Opposed to paying for child health care and child education for the most part is exactly the same sort of rhetoric the Tea Party uses to talk about things like, paying for social services in general. You know, the whole, 53 versus the 47% sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, look, social services are like roads, bridges, infrastructure, libraries, I'm all for subsidizing internet. I'm all for subsidizing other socially productive institutions. I just don't. I happen to not think education is terribly efficient. So that's part of the equation here. But again, you have to get to the root of the problem. The problem is we're basically subsidizing the act of having children. If we make the act of having children truly what it costs, just like if we made meat, it cost exactly what it costs. Like that is, we took all the subsidies that are in the system now, subsidizing meat, and we got rid of those and increased the price of meat, then people would eat less meat. And it's the same kind of argument here. Take away the subsidies, make people feel the real pain of the decision, and then maybe they'll change their decision.
The makers versus the takers. He's the exact same rhetoric that someone in the Tea Party uses to attack things like welfare. Like, oh, the government's coming in.
Look, if somebody's broken, okay, personally, I'm not for welfare for the rich, that is inheritance, and I'm not for welfare for the poor, okay, in the sense that if you're broken, yeah, fine, but don't have kids, all right? This whole idea that you have a right to have kids on the state or on somebody else's wallet is bullshit. You want to be broken, okay, claim disability, okay, and get a check. All right, that's a little different. Being broken or being dysfunctional is different than being a motherfucking cunt, lazy asshole who thinks they're entitled to have a bunch of frickin' kids. All right, and have the state pay for them. You can't see the difference between those two things? Somebody who's hostile against people having any option to fail whatsoever. I'm not suggesting we put anybody on the street, and I'm not even suggesting that we directly harm any child or prevent it from getting an education. What I'm saying is let's first go to the people who are responsible for the decision. If they can afford it, make them pay for it. And if they can't pay for it, then make them give back to the state something, maybe their fertility. Okay, maybe a guarantee against them creating more liability for the state to have to pay for. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with asking the poor to be responsible for their check? And frankly, I would say I'd also like there to be a clear and easy right to die, because I think there's plenty of poor people who just like to gracefully get the fuck out of here if you gave them the right to do it. Okay, they'd rather not live in your cardboard boxes or your fucking shelters. They'd rather not live in your halfway houses or your fucking prisons, for that matter. I'd give every prisoner the right to commit suicide, a free right to a graceful exit.
And in taking my money to subsidize the choices or the life of these other people, and they're degrading my quality of life. So,
well, they are. I mean, you can't deny the truth, all right? I mean, $8,000 a year buys a lot of hookers, buys a lot of what I want out of my life. Why the fuck can't I make this argument? They're degrading my life so they can sit there and do something I think is completely irresponsible, so they can play God. They're playing God and they don't have the wallet to pay for it? That's kind of bullshit, isn't it? On its face. I'm going to play God, but I can't afford it.
These people can have a better life, or their horrible choices, or their idiotic choices, or whatever, are going to be, paid for partially, at least, by the government. He uses the exact same.
Well, look, you get what you subsidize. That's just the truth, right? There's no other argument to be made here, right? You subsidize a behavior, you're going to get more of it. I'm just saying, quit subsidizing it and try to make the pain commensurate to the gain or whatever. And again, I don't want to go through all my whole list of social policies, but yeah, I don't think people are entitled to unlimited health care. I'm not obligated to pay for liver transplants and all kinds of extraordinary crap. I'm all for people being given the availability to a minimum, and if they want more, let them go to work, earn the money, and pay for it. But why should I have to pay Why should I have to pay other people to do things I don't think is ethically correct and I think is extravagant and a waste of money? I'd rather have a fair right to buy a house for the fair price of what a house should cost. And the reason why houses cost more and why everything else costs more is because we waste, the average citizen, we waste $150,000 on their health care. I'd rather you keep your $150,000. Give me the money and let me have a house. Fuck you. I don't want your doctors and I don't want your MRIs. I don't want your goddamn technology. Shove all that shit up your own ass. okay, and give me the fucking house that you're basically burned down to pay for all this crap.
Sort of rhetoric, and it's making the exact, essentially, same argument, but it just strikes me as weird knowing what I do know of Gary's politics. He's taken this group, children, and declared that it's unfair for the government to come in and take money from him, or anyone else, I guess, in the form of taxes and other stuff to pay for those kids to, live and have an education. I'm fairly certain, though, that Gary's in favor of progressive taxation system as well as the welfare state in some form. I could be mistaken on this, but I'm fairly certain that Gary wasn't. I'm fairly certain that Gary wasn't standing and applauding every time Reince Priebus got in front of a camera and said that the Democrats and the welfare state are ruining this country. They're crushing the entrepreneurship, and they're crushing. They're crushing.
Yeah, okay, so just leave it at that. Yeah, you're sure I'm not a Republican. I'm not. I'm not a teabagger, okay? But I'm really pissed off at liberals and progressives and Democrats, too, because they're just pissing the money away, okay? They're not spending it, investing it in the future. They're just borrowing money and giving handouts to the assholes and the rich. I mean, fuck the assholes and fuck the rich.
Americans who actually work for a living. And we need to lower taxes on people and stop taking money from people because they know how to spend it better than other people do. I really doubt Gary kind of cheered on that sort of thing. But
yeah, no, I don't. But I do think that we should pay people to work. Okay, and you can't. It ain't gonna work if you're paying out all this money to all this other shit. Then you're gonna tax people for working. But yeah, tax the rich first.
Seems to be arguing for essentially that when it comes to these children. When it comes to...
Children don't come from nowhere, okay? They don't pop out of the ether. If they were purely created by some accidental function of the universe, then I'd be all for taking all responsibility we could possibly take for their existence. But we know where they come from, and they come from dumb, stupid decisions made with other people's money. All right? And so I'm just saying, if people are making the decision with their own frickin' wallet, maybe they'll make some different decisions. You want to control world population? Well, then make these parents feel the pain.
Other areas and groups, Gary does seem to be fine with, degrading the quality of their life in the form of taxes in order to, make them foot the bill for other people's life choices. But here he's suddenly against it. I'm not sure if he's just not thought this all the way through or what, but it does strike me as a bit of a contradiction.
Yeah, I don't see any contradiction, okay? I'm not for subsidizing personal choices, lifestyle choices. I'm for subsidizing civilization. Everything it takes to have a civilization, yeah, I'm for paying for that. But all this other crap I don't think is necessary to civilization. I don't think kids are, to hear the truth. Not for the kind of civilization I'm looking at.
Furthermore, the idea that paying for child health care education is subsidizing childbirth strikes me as a bit silly. Firstly, our birth rate in the United States is the lowest it's been since 1920, which is the first year we've actually had good records on what the birth rate in the United States is. So we've had the lowest recorded birth rate ever in the United States right now.
Oh, yeah, compared to what? So even that makes any sense since the 1920s. But it doesn't matter because we're importing it from other locations. So, yeah, we're still going to grow the population. But that's not the argument. Okay, it doesn't matter how low the birth rate goes, the problem still exists. The equation is still the same, and it's just a reality. Okay, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the demographics are. It's either right or wrong to force people to pay for other people's reproductive choice, and it doesn't really matter how low the birth rate goes. I still think having kids is unethical, and I shouldn't be obliged to pay somebody to be unethical.
And the only reason our birth rate has been artificially high in the past is because of immigration. Otherwise, we'd be facing the exact same sort of population demographic concerns that Japan and Western Europe are going through.
Yeah, and these aren't concerns, right? These are just part of the rational equation. Like, you can't continue to grow population. You do know that Earth is a finite-sized planet and that it's not going to get any bigger, and the amount of oil in the ground is not going to grow, and none of this other stuff's going to grow with population. So obviously, this is something that has to be dealt with. It's not a problem or a crisis or any of that kind of crap. It's an inevitable thing you have to deal with if you're going to be responsible civilizations. You have to deal with the fact that you can't depend on growth forever. Sooner or later, you have to say no growth, maybe even reduction.
Right now, or will go through in the near future. So we already have a really low birth rate, historically speaking, for our country. And strikes me as a bit odd, especially since, that whole, paying for the services, for these services just subsidizes X, is the exact same argument that pro-life people use when it comes to, say, funding Planned Parenthood or having sex education in public schools. I'm wondering if Gary and other antinatalists think that the government should pay for birth control or abortion, and what his response to, if that's the case, what his or their response.
Yeah, because those are necessary medical services, okay? And they're not that expensive. So of course they should be made publicly available. And they should be especially subsidized for the people who especially need them, who are the poor. They're the ones that should be having abortions, quite obviously. If they can't afford to have a kid, they don't have the structure to properly raise one in. They're living in some smelly, dirty ghetto full of cockroaches. Well, guess what? They shouldn't be having no frickin' kids. So yeah, we should be paying them to have abortions. We should write them. We shouldn't just pay for their abortion. We should pay them to have the abortion, and then we should pay them to get fucking sterilized.
Response to a pro-lifer would be if they said that, oh, you're just coming in here and you're taking away my money to subsidize and pay for the stupid lifestyle decisions of a third party.
Again, it's not a lifestyle decision. It's the ability to make a decision. They can't make the choice without the means to make the choice. Correct? I'm not saying that we should subsidize abortions for people who can pay for their abortion. I'm not saying the government should pay for a middle class or a rich person's abortion. We're talking about paying for poor people's abortion so poor people have the option, the choice, to make a choice. They have the freedom to make the choice. All right? So those are the people that need freedom provided to them with these means, money. Okay? But they don't have a right to impose in the sense of having children. That's an imposition. Okay? That's not protecting their choice. That's imposing.
I wonder what his response to that would be. People have been having kids long before child health care and education services were provided by the government. And I imagine that if those services stopped, that people would still have children. So I don't really think you can make the argument that we're subsidizing childbirth, at least with those programs.
Well, I think it's just idiotic to say we're not subsidizing it. To say that a benefit doesn't create a cause doesn't create an effect. A subsidy creates the effect. You get more of what you subsidize. It's clearly a subsidy. You're going to get more of it. All right. So take away the subsidy where you can, and clean up the mess where it exists. And like I said, I just make it clear. Okay. I mean, you want welfare. Okay, get sterilized. That's the condition. You want an extra $500 in welfare? Get sterilized.
Gary has a problem with. But one of the things that I want to talk about is that some of this comes off of a few things that Gary said in Hate Club before he left. He said in Hate Club and in videos that imposing life on another being is a horrible crime because you don't know what sort of life that being could have. There's suffering in the universe, and suffering is really bad, and all the good things that people experience don't cancel out suffering, blah, blah, blah. Life is horrible. He's talked about
whatever.
reincarnation.
This is not what I said in Hate Club, but whatever. This is a crappy paraphrase. But go ahead, play your game.
Hate Club, and he talked about essentially. He never really gave it a term, but I'm going to call it ouchie radiation, and essentially that everyone emits this like negative radiation when they're feeling bad, and you can quantifiably measure this and objectively say whose suffering is worse than who, and you can have a scale and you can weigh all of the suffering and all of the pleasure, and all of the suffering is way worse than all of the pleasure.
Well, like I said, this is a crappy paraphrase. What I argued is that you could metaphor it as a type of radiation, that consciousnesses create value. All right? Every single sentient existence creates value in having a welfare state, its state of being. So if it's in a negative state of being, it's creating a negative kind of metaphorical radiation, a kind of weight of negative. All right? And if it's less negative, then it's less negative. I don't know about the positive part, but let's just pretend there's some sort of really, truly positive state. Then it'll be radiating this positive stuff. And you could take the negatives and the pluses, and you could do the math, come up with an equal sign, and get a net result. And I'm arguing that the net result of consciousness radiating in the universe right now on this planet, Earth, all the sentient beings added up, when you mix it all together, you get a net negative weight. Okay, there's more suffering being endured, hard pain, and very little positive gain.
And it's objective, and suffering is objective, and so is pleasure, and all these things. But, anyways, so we have this new life here, that's been created, and Gary thinks, creating life's a bad thing. But we have this new life here, this child, let's call it Billy. And Gary thinks that Billy's conception, his birth, I should say, are really, really bad things, because Billy is going to be brought into this horrible, uncaring, God-forsaken universe where everything evil and suffering occurs and all that. And Gary...
Yeah, well, look, you want to get born in Indonesia? You want to die in an Indian carpet-making factory? You want to be born in fucking Africa? You want to be born in a Chicago ghetto? Fuck you. I don't think you do. So you want to keep talking like there isn't a real implication here? Well, there is a real implication. There's real shit happening out there, fucker.
Gary, if he had his way, Billy would never have been born. But Billy was born. And, Gary doesn't like Gary balks basically whenever the suicide thing is brought into the antinatalist discussion. Basically he says, he never got a choice when he was given he was never given a choice to enter into the game in the first place. So essentially, handing him a gun and telling him to sort it out for himself is a bullshit option, essentially. So, the whole, Billy could kill himself thing is out of the picture. That's out of the picture. But
it's not out of the picture. I'm just saying you can't excuse the behavior with that as the excuse. All right? It's not my obligation to clean up a mess. It's their obligation not to make a mess. So again, don't keep moving the responsibility. The responsibility isn't mine. If I kill myself, exactly how does that prevent a child from being born in Africa tomorrow? Well, it goddamn doesn't.
So we're left with this new life, Billy, who has no choice in being born, and at least for the foreseeable future, has no choice in being alive. His parents inflicted some grave sort of injustice upon him by creating him in the first place. And in response to this unspeakable, horrible crime of creating the new life that is Billy, Gary would, if given his way, commit a second crime upon Billy by denying Billy access to tools that very well...
Well, again, you say I would deny the existence of educational institutions. No. I clearly said this isn't how they should pay for them. I didn't say they shouldn't be paid for. All right? I didn't say they shouldn't get the money for it and take care of kids. I never said that. I've actually said we should build Disneyland-style orphanages right now. Okay? Taking care of kids should be a #1 priority. So that's not my argument. My argument is that we shouldn't pay for it by taxing people who don't create the problem. We should pay for it by taxing the fuck out of the people creating the problem. So let's go find the rich people and the middle class people who are having kids and make them pay for the poor people having kids. All right? But you don't tax people out of their frickin' house to pay for somebody else's reproductive choice. That's goddamn bullshit. Tax diapers, tax toys for, well, no, you can't tax toys. That would be unfair to the kids again. But, yeah, get the money through some other mechanism that proportionately distributes it on the people choosing to have children.
Well, could give Billy a chance at a halfway decent life at the very least as we measure things in the West, or at least would give him the ability to ameliorate some of the suffering he could experience in life. I mean, it strikes me as odd that someone who is so concerned with suffering, as Gary is, would be opposed to paying for programs that would make the lives of children, humans, sentient beings, better.
Well, again, I don't want to argue about the betterment of the stupid educational system, okay? I say fuck teachers, fuck the institutions, let's pay kids to learn and pay them, say, 70 or 80 grand for passing a GED. All right, because we have the internet now, we have technology, we can build one national high school, put the best teachers in the world in it, okay, pay them 300 grand each, okay, videotape all of it, put it on the cable TV, put it on the internet for free, and then give kids a huge incentive to learn the fucking information and pass a fucking test. I say that'll get you a smarter kid, a better kid, at a cheaper price. And you'll be paying the person who's supposed to be doing the work, which is the student. And then they'll get off the streets, they'll get off the basketball courts, they'll quit playing fucking field hockey and football and all this other crap, and they'll actually want to pass the fucking test because they're going to get $80,000 for doing it. And that is half the price we're paying for a high school graduate now. And that's the joke of the current system. But I didn't want to get into that argument. The system sucks as it is, but even if it was a perfect system, my argument is you don't pay for it by taxing property. You pay for it by taxing people who are having fucking kids.
Especially when we're already talking, when he wants to talk about, say, ending eating meat to make animals' lives better. I mean, after all, why punish a child, Billy, in this hypothetical, for the sins of his parents? That strikes me as a rather biblical thing to do.
Well, again, so it's a huge straw man. So again, you're way off base. You don't have any evidence. You'll never find a video where I ever say kids should be mistreated or harmed in any way whatsoever. So again, you missed the target. You did. You missed. This is a huge miss. Not as big as your miss by trying to claim that cigarette smokers are a social liability, but this is another huge fucking miss.
I think Gary would be opposed to. And, I thought that us here in the West had long ago set aside the idea of corruption of blood. Billy's an innocent life in this matter. He had no choice in being born, and he exists whether Gary or myself or anyone else would want him to. So why should we fuck over Billy's life and deny him access to healthcare and education?
Again, that's not what I argued for, but, the healthcare thing I'm dicey on. Like I said, I'm not too sure the healthcare system's worth what we're paying for it, anywhere near what we're paying for it. And I don't think I would torture kids the way people torture kids. I don't think it should be legal to force a kid to go for a 5th round of chemo. I think that's all crap.
Because his parents decided to have them. The life's already here. I think we should do whatever we can to make its existence more comfortable and as suffering-free as possible. I think that's a good thing for us to do. I think that's an ethical and moral thing for us to do. Maybe Gary disagrees.
Yeah, straw man. Sorry. No, that's not where I disagree. I disagree on how you pay for it again. Why should the people who didn't choose to make the mess pay to clean up the mess? It's that simple. All right? These assholes want to spill shit all over the place. Why should the people minding their own business, fucking around on the couch, have to pay for it? Why should the people using a condom be responsible for cleaning up the mess people not using one make?
But I would think that if anything, Gary would be in favor of more social programs for people in order to potentially at least limit the amount of suffering that those people will experience in their lives, or at least hopefully equip them with the tools so that they can better their own lives and the lives of those around them. Gary thinks these laws are imposed upon him and or imposed upon him because he lives in a democracy. And he spends a lot of time in this video complaining about the stupidity of, voters, and how they're uninformed and they have no idea what the fuck they're doing. And I generally agree with that. I don't really think anyone who watches my channel would think I would have much of a disagreement with that statement, at least. Because it's, true. People around the world are pretty fucking stupid and have little to no understanding about many of the issues they talk about or vote on or care about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, in this video, you demonstrate that very kind of ignorance, okay? So with the straw man cigarette argument, the straw man argument about my disagreement with using property taxes to fund reproduction.
They're not educated and they're stupid, which, of course, why Gary thinks that, paying for children to be educated is a bad thing. Because, of course, the way to solve the problem of an uneducated electorate is to dismantle our education system.
Yeah, well, like I said, the education system is a crap, all right? It's an industrial complex. Only it's the performance artist industrial complex. Okay, that's all. The education system is a farce. It's a bunch of people playing out the same play. Okay, over and over and over again, redundantly. Okay, why? We have technology now. They don't have to redundantly do the same crap over and over and over in live performance. All right, we just don't need to keep paying them anymore. All right, and all they're doing is extorting us, and it's a stupid system. It's just an ignorant way to educate. You want to educate somebody? Again, it's this subsidy thing. You want somebody to learn? Pay them to do it. Paying works. It does. I was, when I was a kid, I delivered newspapers every afternoon, 2 hours of my life, every frickin' day, walking 7 miles with frickin' newspapers. And I was making like 35 cents a day. I mean, if I could have made 30 grand back in those days, comparable to 70, or even $15,000 by just passing a GED, yeah, I wouldn't have been wasting my goddamn time delivering newspapers.
And guarantee that most kids in the United States end up as poor, illiterate peasants who would be scarcely qualified to operate a McDonald's cash register.
Right, and that's because they're given no incentive to learn, just none whatsoever, and they're given every incentive to jerk off. And so if you put a nice big prize in front of them, they will, you build a nice little golden thingy, they will chase it.
Let alone make decisions that could affect millions, if not billions, of sentient lives. Although, to end on a positive note, Gary does end his video by saying that democracy isn't credible because uneducated morons who know nothing can vote, and their vote counts as much as people who are educated. And he also thinks that, maybe they shouldn't have a vote. And, he says that the people who are going to voice an opinion or vote should have some sort of credible knowledge. Well, I'm rather, shocked to hear that Gary thinks the business of running the country should be left to, I guess, the hands of, the educated elite, people who actually are educated and hold degrees in these subjects. People like myself, Sebich, or D. Landon Cole, for that fact, too. But, I'm sure that our new triumvirate will do its very best to cast our votes in the best interests of our uneducated proletariat brethren.
Yeah.
So I hope...
Well, frankly, you probably wouldn't pass my IQ test, though, okay? So it all depends on what questions you put on the test, right? And you guys aren't even going to get the simple ones right. Do animals feel? Do cucumbers have a brain? Yeah, you're gonna fail on those tough ones. Jabich for sure. Jabich doesn't know the difference between a plant and an animal.
All of you, have a nice day. Go Packers.
Whatever. Yeah, football, you'd be in trouble right there, too. Any idiot who watches football, you shouldn't be allowed to vote. You're too stupid. You're too gullible, a soap opera watching sycophant. That's what that is. This is sycophantery. Alright, anyway, this is a way long video again. So anyway, yeah, it's funnish. Sort of, kind of. In a, gee, I sure pwned your ass kind of way. I mean, man, you didn't get anything right here. Hardly at all. So, yeah, it's hard for me not to feel pretty good because, you know, I just sort of just, this was easy. Too easy. It's just too easy. So, thank you for making it too easy.